Welcome, welcome. My name is Joaquin Watai. I'm a wood turner. If you are joining me on TikTok, if you want to see multi-camera view and hear my microphone, you need to go to my YouTube channel. I have multi-camera set up there. I'm working on the feed for TikTok to be able to use Streamlabs to do the same, but I don't have that yet. So if you click my bio, click the link tree, it'll take you to my YouTube channel. You'll get multi-camera view there. I will try to see the questions and answer them if I see them on TikTok, but I'm primarily focusing on multi-camera, multi-angles via YouTube. So nothing against TikTok, but it's easier over there for me to manage that. And TikTok Studio is now letting Streamlabs take over, which it should have done from the first part. So I'm still working on getting that reconnected. What I have here is resin off pour from Shocks Functional Art, and he put inside of it cutoffs from his laser cutter. So it's full of little weird shapes that's just what was remaining from pieces he cut out with his laser. And this is going to be lid. This is going to be the body. This is resin. Shocks use super clear resin, which is very hard, so I'm going to have to use the dreaded carbide tools. But I think this is going to be a very pretty piece. So again, if you want to see multi-camera view, if you want to see it from overhead and as we're hollowing from over there, where you can see the action, go to my YouTube channel. The link is up in the corner there. You know where it is. So the first thing we're going to do, of course, is get my face shield. And we're going to just make sure that we have it nice and round. I've already epoxied tenons onto the lid section and the body section. So we're going to make sure it's rounded up, and then we're going to start parting off the lid section. It's pretty fairly well in balance. Not bad. I'm also streaming on my Facebook page live, the multi-camera view. So the first thing I want to do is just get this in balance. Then I'm going to make sure that that tenon is squared up with the tenon on the base of the body. We're just making some light passes to make sure that this is balanced out and it's round. That feels pretty good. Let's take a look here. We're getting a lot of chatter, a lot of chip out. We'll deal with that a little bit more here in a few minutes. I just wanted to get this a little closer to round. The gold colored resin seems to be less apt to chip out than the blue. I spoke too soon. And one of the challenges that I have here is the interface between wood and resin. I've got this very soft cutoff of 16th inch or 8th inch ply, birch ply from the laser cutter, and this very hard resin. So the tool is going through soft and then hard very rapidly, and so we're getting a little bit of that chatter from that. Again, if you want to hear the microphone, go to my YouTube channel. You can hear me a lot more clearly there. Apologize that you don't have that here on TikTok. I'm working on resolving that. So just out of curiosity and just to see what the resin mix is here, we're going to try my bowl gouge real quick. But I don't have high hopes. I've had pretty mixed experience here with this brand of resin because it's very, very hard. And it does seem to want to cut today. We're getting a nice clean cut. Can't complain about that. That we can complain about. A soft brush, toothbrush works really well for that too. All right, good morning over there. Who's that? Oh, hey, Katie. Good morning. Where are you on YouTube or Facebook? Stream comments on. So I'm just curious where you're watching from. So I'm actually really pleasantly surprised. I'm getting a nice clean cut here with my bowl gouge, which has not been historically my experience using this resin from Shocks. It's usually so hard that the bowl gouge doesn't want to play ball. So that's a nice, that's a really nice thing to have happen this morning. Very happy with that. I by far would prefer to use my bowl gouge than carbide. On YouTube. Wonderful. Thank you, Katie. I really appreciate it. So we're round. I'm just cleaning up some of that chatter. I really don't need to necessarily worry about it at the moment, but it's just a matter of form. I don't want to have all that chatter there. If I can remove it. And I do want to start kind of thinking about the shape of my little vessel and the shape of my lid. If I can remove some bulk while I have this all in one piece, it's going to make things easier when I'm using it, when I'm turning it in two pieces. We're just going to start moving this towards the shape that we want. We're going to come down to this piece of walnut that I have glued on to provide a tenon. And that's 2-part epoxied on. That's not going to go anywhere. Go ahead and clean this up a little bit. This is one of the reasons I dislike turning resin so much. This stuff is absolutely the messiest. We are doing decently as far as quality of cuts with the gouge. So we're going to go ahead and start working on this lid. On this tenon needs to get aligned so that it's in line with this tenon, which is what's holding it. So when I cut this tenon a little bit, it'll align it much more accurately. And then again, my separation here is going to be roughly right along this line. That's where I'm going to part the lid. I'm going to leave a little tenon on the bottom of the lid, so the shape of the lid is actually going to start at this line. And then that will fit into the body, and that will be how that lid is secured. But you can see I'm getting cut out, and then the hardness of the resin. There's a distinct difference. And in the finished piece, but we'll get there. So again, we're just going to bring this down, make sure that it's nice and even and round. And I was worried about that. We're probably going to chip out a little bit here. But we can start working on the shape I'm trying to get to. Let me sharpen real quick. Now, the other reason I often will stick to the carbide with this over the traditional tool is because this is very hard resin, and even if it's cutting well like it is right now, it eats the edge of my gouge. It really does a number on sharpness very quickly. So what I may do is go back to carbide and only use the bowl gouge for finishing cuts. That is a very distinct possibility. Otherwise, I'm going to sharpen this. I'm going to sharpen this down to a nub in half an hour. Again, if you want to hear the microphone I'm wearing, if you're on TikTok and you want to hear the microphone I'm wearing, go to the link in my bio, go to my YouTube channel. I'm live on YouTube and Facebook right now, as well as TikTok. Okay. Definitely needed to sharpen up, which confirms my suspicion. It's one challenge we're going to have to deal with. I can definitely go a lot faster when I'm cutting through that plywood. Those wood offcuts, they're much, much softer than the resin. So you can tell where the wood is denser than where there's more wood than resin, I should say. The resin's far more dense. Okay. I will say that whether it's wood or resin, proper cutting technique still applies. I'm still using a slicing technique. This is definitely not something that you want to wail away at. It's more of a finesse cut. Now this blank was provided to me by Shocks Functional Art. He's on TikTok. He's on Facebook. I believe he's got a YouTube channel. You should go check him out on Facebook. He recently had his original Facebook page stolen, and he could use some help building back his audience there. There's a lot of air in here. We're going to have to work real hard to make sure that we fill all these little holes. Let's fix this tenon. What we're going to do is come in with a 3/8 inch spindle gouge. Actually move this tool rest a little bit. You can see the tenon's not quite square, or round I should say. So the first thing we're going to do is make sure that edge is even and flat. Come on, you. Hang on a second. Let me sharpen this up. There we go. Fresh edge on that. There we go. That's what we're looking for. Make sure that's a nice clean edge on the tenon and a nice flat surface to interface with the shoulders of the chuck. Okay, now we need to cut our tenon for the lid. To do that, we're going to use a parting tool. Again, if you cannot hear me on TikTok, I'm wearing a face shield. I do have a microphone on, but if you want to hear the mic'd conversation, you need to go over to my YouTube channel. Currently can't use multi-camera setup on TikTok. I just reapplied for access. TikTok went from using TikTok Live Studio to using Streamlabs, which I have and am using to stream live on Facebook and YouTube. So we'll get there with TikTok, but we're already there with YouTube. So this is a parting tool, and I'm going to cut my tenon. Now, I want to see something. One of the things that I want to achieve with this design is that I want there to be a definitive line between the gold and the blue. So I have a little bit gold left here, which is I'm going to take down because I do want a fairly deep tenon here. This is going to have a suction fit. So I need to, what I'm doing here, stop, check, and see, yep, I can see my pencil line a lot better here with it stopped. I need to come down about a third of the width of my parting tool in order to take out the rest of that gold so that we get a definitive line between what's the top and what's the base of the piece. Put a little bit of freshen the burr here. Now, the other thing that I need to do is I need to make sure that that the sides of the tenon are perfectly parallel, that they're directly straight. So what I have to do is sight down to the bedways of the lathe, because those are perfectly parallel. So, and perfectly 90 degrees to the travel of the piece. So I check here, and I'm very good, except for that little piece at the bottom that I just cut. However, that's where the part's going to be, where the separation is going to be. And I do need to take a tiny bit more out. So we'll do that. I'm going to raise this up just a hair. We'll take a tiny bit more out, which is also going to give us a little bit of width for our parting tool. Freshen that burr again. This is very, very hard resin, and it's definitely taking its toll on the tools, which is why I will most likely use carbide for most of the shaping. If I had a carbide parting tool, I would definitely be using the carbide parting tool. Okay, now I'm going to use a smaller parting tool and make sure I get that squared up. Down here at the bottom. There we go. Again, just looking down, sighting down, and comparing the walls of that tenon to the bedway of the lathe, and we're going to part right there. Not yet. I'm just delineating that line. We're going to work on this shape a little bit more. Again, if you're joining me on TikTok, you can't hear me very well, but if you go to my YouTube channel, the link is right up there, you can. I have a microphone and multiple cameras set up on YouTube and on my Facebook page. I will be adding that to TikTok soon. However, I had to reapply for a stream key because TikTok just canceled their live studio and went with Streamlabs, which I do use, and which is why I'm streaming on those other platforms. So if you can't hear me clearly when I have the face shield down, go to one of those other platforms. So, back to the carbide for the moment. And actually, we're going to switch back to we're going to jump back and forth and back and forth. Let's try the spindle gouge here. Because I have specific results I need. Okay, and we're going to go back to our little parting tool. Make sure we have a nice flat, perpendicular surface here. Well, that is the bottom of the bead. Now, let's make the top of the bead. This I'll form later. Once I have this parted and hollowed, I'll finish shaping up this part of the lid. Not bad, not bad. Touch that up a little bit. Beautiful. I like that. Okay. We've got a little bit of a flare there. We'll go back to our wider parting tool. See if we can't get that to calm down. There we go. Now when you're parting something, especially something this hard, you absolutely, for your own safety, need to make the cut wider than the parting tool. Otherwise, you're going to have a couple things happen. One being heat, which especially with resin is not a good idea. But two, this tool can bind up and catch and fling free. And if it catches and flings, it has a tendency to kick back and shoot the blade at you. And that's very dangerous. So be aware. Don't just stick it straight in. Make two cuts. So you go in a little bit, come back and widen it. Go in a little deeper, come back and widen it, just like that. So that you prevent that tool from binding up in there and you reduce the heat caused by the cutting. Especially when you're cutting resin, and especially when you're cutting resin that is this dense, you really need to make sure that you try to keep the amount of heat that you produce down. This is very dense resin. This is super clear, deep pour, and some super clear tabletop. And this stuff is very hard. I'm going to go ahead and freshen up the burr on this little sharpening tool. And let's clear this up a little bit. It's getting a little ridiculous over here. Oof. Resin is messy. All right, here we go. Keep working on this. Again, coming back and widening that cut. Let's see if I can get light a bit better for myself. Hopefully that's not washing it out too much on the camera, but I gotta see down in there. Alright, that's about as far as I want to go with this short-handled little parting tool, because discretion is the better part of valor, and I don't want to end up with that tool catching and hitting me in the face. Yes, I'm making a lidded box fan. So sometimes when you're on the lathe, especially when you're turning materials like this, sometimes you have to make decisions based more on safety than design. And for safety's sake, we're going to use a handsaw to finish cutting this off of here. Or we might use the pull saw, because I don't know where I put the handsaw. Or the pull saw for that. There's the pull saw. So I'll use this little pull saw. Again, just for safety's sake, this is very dense material, and that's a very short handle on that. Where is my big handsaw? That's a very short handle on that tool. If that was to catch at this point, this deep in the piece, it would be dangerous. It would be dangerous. It would harm me. So, discretion is the better part of valor. We're almost through. And again, this stuff is so dense. This resin is really hard. There we go. Okay. So this is our lid section. This is our body. We're going to turn and finish the inside of the lid before we finish the body. So first, I'm going to bring the tailstock up here and establish a center point, because I'm going to take that out of the chuck. So I want to make sure that I have a center. Let's back this up. Let's do that again. Very slowly bring that tailstock in and let it settle. There we go. And see, that moved a little bit, which is probably the wood here. The cherry at the base is probably what moved. But we have established dead line center. So when we get this back around, we can square it up and it will match the lid. Set this aside. Bring our lid up. And we're going to bring up our tailstock and put pressure. Tighten this down a hair. What we're going to do is drive this down onto the shoulders of the jaws of the chuck, which makes sure that we have a good, tight, square joint between the square cut shoulder of the tenon and the jaws of the chuck. Make sure that's lined up. Now we can hollow. So we're going to get tailstock out of the way so I don't end up running my elbow into it. Because the 60-degree live center in the elbow leaves scars. Again, you can see multi-camera view. In fact, we're changing the camera right now. And you can hear my microphone on my YouTube channel. Go to the link tree in my bio. It'll take you right there. So we're going to use carbide again for hollowing. For the majority of the bulk removal here. And the primary reason we're doing that, again, is because this resin is so hard, and I really don't want to lose 2 full inches of steel on my 5/8 inch bowl gouge due to sharpening for one piece. Get too aggressive. It's one thing I don't like about carbide. More surface area in contact, and if you're too aggressive, if you're trying to move fast, you will get catches like that. Okay, let's take a look at what we got going on here. One thing we need to think about is thickness. We have plenty of space, which is good. Not too bad. I want to get up. You can see where the wood, the little cutoffs floated. There's more up here, so we definitely want to get up into that and expose that a lot more. But let me get some water real quick. Starting to warm up here in good old North Kakalaki. We're supposed to get up to 80 degrees today. May even kick the fan on. All right, so back to it. One of the things that you can do to counter that tendency of carbide to grab is get a long handle. This is a 16-inch long handle from Define. I found it on the Zon, and that increased my leverage immensely, which makes it much safer to cut. So, especially if you have a short handle, the stock handle that came with this carbide set is only that long. It's very short, and when you get that start to bind up and catch like that, because you get so much surface area in contact, this little sucker kicks right up into your face shield, which is why you better wear a face shield, because it's a punch. I've been hit a couple of times. So it's something to think about. Improve your leverage, make the tool work for you, but also, again, what causes that is being too aggressive in the cuts. So that's a little bit of a warning if you start having that problem with carbide, to back off. All right, I can both hear, feel, and see that I'm starting to expose some of that wood up here. So we're going to go ahead and stop and look. Oh, yeah, that's cool. It's a cool little shape. Feel what the thickness of our lid is. We definitely need to bring the sides out more, but we're probably the depth we need to go, because I'm going to put a little knob like finial at the top here. This is going to come back all the way around the top. If you're watching on YouTube, this shape here, this is going to come down much narrower and have just a little button or knob on the top, so I can't go too much more this way depth wise, but I want to get a little bit more, again, to expose those cutoffs. That's really cool. But we also need to bring it out. All right, let's take a look and feel better, lighter. Still can come out a little further on the edges here, but this curve is too big. Maybe not. Maybe it'll work. Let's take one more pass with this. See if we need to go to the swan neck tool, which has a smaller diameter cutting tip. Might be able to pull it off with this one. I'm just passing very, very lightly, trying to make sure that I have even surface between where the wood and the resin is. You can hear it. That clicking sound is actually the differences in densities, and what's clicking is the softer wood. And it is definitely much softer than the resin around it. Okay, and we have some air bubbles. So this is the time before we get to sanding that we start to address these air bubbles. And I think rather than CA glue, we're going to use UV resin. So, just a second here. May launch things at me. You know what? Before I make this decision, let me make sure my UV light has power, because if I don't have batteries, then it's not going to work. So we may have to go to plan B, which is, we might be okay. We might be okay. We do have power, so. Otherwise, we'd go to plan B, which is CA glue, which is perfectly acceptable as well. So, from an overhead view, you can see we've got some holes here, some fairly substantial bubbles. We're going to just drop in some UV resin. We're going to give it a little encouragement. to thin out a little and suck down into those holes. There we go. And we'll light it up. Gives me another opportunity to get a little bit of water in my system. While that's setting, it only takes a couple seconds. A little bit tacky. The batteries are low in my UV light. I need to change them. It takes a whole passel of AAAs. 6, I think, or 8. Still a little bit tacky here. Let's see. How are my batteries in here? Not good. Definitely need to get fresh batteries out here into the UV resin, into the UV light. Give that a little bit more. A little bit more time. If things are rough, you don't have batteries or whatever, you can set this out in the sunlight and it'll cure very quickly. This is a little frustrating. Hang on a second. Let me check what battery size this is and message the people in the house, and we will get some fresh batteries out here, hopefully. Oh, they're double A's. 6 double A's. All right, let me message inside while this is curing and see if I can get someone to bring me out some more double A's. Give that a second. Where's my phone? Oh, you guys are on my phone. Never mind, I can't message. Well, yes, I can. I'll do it this way. Forget I have my computer over here. There we go. Message sent. That's pretty good. I'm going to give it a few more seconds. Give it a few more seconds. Morning, Victor. So UV resin, this usually cures faster if there's more power in the flashlight. The batteries are nearly dead. I haven't used this thing in months. So my apologies. I didn't anticipate there being a lot of bubbles in here, so I didn't plan on using my UV resin. But UV resin is a perfect solution for filling these bubble holes. It cures perfectly clear, so what's underneath it is still going to be very visible. We'll see the gold mica powder and the little pieces of wood. It's not going to interfere with any of that color, and there's glow powder in here because it came from Shox Art, and Shox makes everything glow. So, and there we go. That's cured. Feels good. Give it a few more seconds. That's cured so that I can come. The flashlight is on. It's just the batteries are very low. I can come in here again and make some cuts and get that nice clean surface again. And we have a nice sandable, finishable surface in here. All right, cool. So that usually goes a little bit faster if you have better batteries in your flashlight. Yeah, I do need a rechargeable UV light. That would be nice. That one's just very powerful. And actually, I probably could get some rechargeable batteries for it. That's a very powerful UV light when it has full batteries in it. And it cures really quickly. Oh, no, we only have AAA batteries. So we'll work with CA for the rest. I'll have to get some AA's. I think I used them all for my UV flashlight. So we're going to come back in here with the carbide again and just do some smoothing passes to level out that surface. But what we did do was fill those little air bubble holes, those pockets. And as you can see, that UV resin cuts just like the other resin. Works very well. It's very effective. Awesome. Okay, we're ready to sand. Now, one thing I am going to do is I have, again, this is a very thin, this is Baltic birch ply. Some of these cutoffs are walnut, but they're infinitely softer than the resin around them. So there's this big piece of ply here, and you can see where it's shaggy because it's so soft. So what we're going to do is take some thin CA. We're going to use some Parfix, which is a surgical CA. And I'm going to cover my lathe bed. I beat up my little silicone pads so much I need to get replacements. So I'm going to go back to my old standby of a piece of plywood, old shelf or something, and cover that. And we're just going to soak this. We're just going to soak this birch here with CA and stabilize it, so that when we sand it, it has a little bit more of a chance of keeping an even surface with the resin around it. It's very, very soft compared to the resin. And so if you're not careful, what can happen is you have a flat surface that actually ends up with dips in it because you're sanding more material, the softer material, more than the harder material. So I'm not using this to fill, I'm just using this to stabilize. And most of it's going to get sanded away, but I want to make sure that those surfaces of that plywood have a fighting chance to stay even with the resin around it. Little accelerant. Don't care what that looks like. It's like I said, I'm about to sand it. I'm just stabilizing that softer plywood. So we're going to power sand, but we're going to switch from a regular face shield to a powered respirator because I don't want to breathe this resin. It's not good stuff. So give me a second here, get my respirator. So for those of you who are listening on the microphone, I apologize. We're about to go Darth Vader mode. But again, this isn't stuff you want to inhale. It's not real good for you. So apologies to those of you on YouTube. Hearing the fans. it is what it is. Okay. So we're starting with 120 grit. We get all that bubbling from the CA. We'll slowly lay it down. We'll sand with the drill moving in the opposite direction of the lathe. We're not putting a lot of pressure. We're letting the sandpaper do the work. We're going to stop and take a look. Oh yeah, nice. We're going to put in most of the work here with the low grit, which means as we step the grits up, all we're doing is removing the sanding scrapes from the prior grit. We're not doing anything else but just making it smoother. Again, conscious of the fact that the plywood cutoffs in there are softer than the resin. All right, let's take a look here. We need to shape that. I got a little drip of CA glue. I'm going to have to cut that away real quickly. Won't take but a second. Clean that up. Very, very fine cuts. Very, very fine. Just barely touching the tool to it. Really more of a scrape. But I'm barely removing any material at all. It's super fine. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and do the same thing at super, super fine cut. Right down our tenon. There you go, just like that. See if I can get a little bit of a, there we go, get a shear scrape here. Soften this corner just a tad. Nice. Okay. better to cut it than to sand it. Sometimes you have to sand it, but it's better to cut it if you can. So, all right, a little tiny bit more sanding with 120 and we'll step up to 180. We're not going to worry about changing directions. This is primarily resin. We're not really dealing with a terrible... I mean, there is grain in there, but it's not... We don't have to get too buried in, oh, the grain direction, blah, 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 because we're mostly working with resin. And again, keep this little edge soft. Okay. Now we're going to clean this so that we can see if there's any more filling we need to do. And we can start to get a picture of what we're looking at. I'm just using rubbing alcohol because it dries a lot faster than water. Okay. Not bad. Not bad. All right, we're going to go ahead and keep sanding. This is the boring part. Say, creative arts are 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. Oh, 180. Wow, that really woke that surface up. That is nice. Really smoothed that out. So 120, I was not sure how my sanding, if I was going to have to come back and really pay a little more attention to that surface, but 180 really took that down, and I'm much more confident that we're going to have a nice even surface here. Okay, we're going to clean it again and go to 240. Now, the reason I'm cleaning this I'm not making any grain expand. I'm not raising any grain here.
I mean, I guess I am a little bit in this ply, but it's not really relevant. But what I'm doing here is removing that 180 grit that I just created so I don't touch the 240 grit sandpaper to it and put 180 grit scratches in it, which I then have to sand out. So I usually, especially with resin's real sensitive to that, usually we'll end up with a much better finish much faster by removing the residue from the prior grit before stepping up. So this is 240. And the reason I use alcohol instead of water to both raise the grain and to clean it is because alcohol dries 10 times faster than water does. But it does the same thing. But when we're talking about raising the grain, the end grain soaks up the liquid, expands, and then you sand it back. It's just a liquid that dries and evaporates faster. It has the exact same effect. Okay, 320. We're almost done. It's not taken because I spent the time at the lower grit making sure that any issues were sanded away. All I'm doing is removing each successive grit with the next one. Oh, that's a nice surface. Now our final grit is going to be 400, and then we will go to Brad's Workbench sanding paste. if we can find the 400 grit. It's in here. Better be in here. Uh-oh. All right, we're going to have to go to a 3-inch pad, or a 3-inch disc. Because apparently I've used all the 2-inch 400s. We'll have to use a 3-inch disc because I've used all the 2-inch 400 grit discs. All right, now I can take the respirator off because I'm going to be using a sanding paste. The whole reason sanding paste was invented was because it doesn't cause any dust. So I don't have to worry about breathing the dust. Yeah, that was a 3/8 sandpaper on a 2-inch head. Because it's flexible sandpaper. It's that is Wood Turner's Wonders green wave, and it's got a mylar backing, so it's flexible, so that it works just fine. It just wrapped right up around those sides with no problem. And the only reason I use the 3-inch one is because I'm out of 2-inch ones. So that tells you something about where the surface of the work is at as I turn. If I'm using up the smaller diameter, or if I'm using up the finer sanding discs faster than the larger sanding discs, that means I'm putting a good surface on things. So this is Brad's Workbench sanding paste. It is a friable abrasive, and it is food safe. But that really doesn't matter necessarily for I guess you could keep canning in this dish or whatever, so it's going to get finished food safe. But what you do is you rub it in. Friable abrasive means the more you work it, the finer it gets. You rub it in with the lathe stopped, and then you start the lathe at the slowest speed. I have 3 speed bands on this lathe. Slowest right here is 324 or 320-ish. So then you kick it up about 100 RPM. You come to a clean piece of your paper towel, and you just work it some more. And the more you work it, the finer it gets. I do have to tell you that I am sponsored by Brad's Workbench. I'm proud to be. The reason I'm sponsored by Brad's Workbench, I've been searching for finishing processes for years, and Brad and I were asking the same questions about finishes at the same time, and he beat me to making finishes of his own. So I support him as a fellow wood turner, and again, this is the best finishing process that I have found to date. His finish uses, this is again a friable abrasive in a mineral oil carrier with some, I think, a little bit of beeswax.
His finishes are pure tung oil, beeswax, and carnauba wax in 2 different thicknesses. This is going to get his tongue honey, which is more liquid and more oil to wax ratio than his tongue wax. The way you apply both of them is you put them on, let them sit for about 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and then you buff them out. The tongue honey you do off the lathe. You don't have to have it on the lathe and buff it. You can buff it by hand. Hey, Creek, how you doing, brother? The tongue wax, you put it on, you walk away from the lathe for 15 or 20 minutes, you come back and turn the lathe on and buff it. So this is going to take us well over a 2,000 grit finish. And when the paper towel comes away clean, you're no longer removing material. You're done. Put this, once I put the finish on it, the tongue oil is going to soak into the wood surfaces here, and then the wax is going to buff onto this, and then I'm going to put it on the buffing wheel. Hey, James. I'm going to put it on the buffing wheel, and that's really going to get the shine coming out of it. So this is the inside of the lid, the tenon of the lid, and the bead feature of that lid done. These are complete. You complete the inside of your lid before anything else, because once this goes onto the body of the lidded box or vessel, you can't and you turn away your tenon, you can't ever turn it again. You're done. So I mean, there are methods, but they're really not easy. So you don't want to put yourself in that situation. So this is complete with the exception of putting actual finish on it. Now we're going to come back to the body of our piece, and we are going to fit the lid to the body and finish turning the outside shape of the piece and the lid before we hollow. And just based on how long that takes, we've been going since 11:30, so it's been an hour and a half. We may have to cut this live at about 12 noon, just because it's a long time to be live, and I do have to, eat, drink water, things like that at some time. But we're making some progress, and you can start to see. Look at that! How cool is that? Let's look up our which camera. Here, we'll switch cameras. We get these little funky shapes in here. These little wood cutoffs from Shock. And this is going to glow in the dark. So that's going to be really, really neat. That's going to be a lot of fun. All right. Back to that view so that you can see what we're doing here. And remember, I put a little bit of a point in here so that I could get this lined up appropriately. So I'm going to loosen the jaws, drive that point down, and tighten them again, and that's going to regain my alignment. And make sure that's held nice and tight. Go ahead and get my face shield back on. Now, we definitely don't want to take this width down much, the width that's going to be, okay? So, but we do have some chip out here that we have to get rid of. So part of the reason that I shaped the rim of this the way I did so that this bead feature here in this shape is going to kind of account for the fact that we're going to have differing widths here. But when I get this lid fitted on the box and we shape the outside of the box, I can bring this little edge down a little. We can reshape the bead if we want. The only thing we'll never touch again is the underside of this bead and this tenon right here. Those are never going to get cut with tools again. Okay. Hey, Steve, how you doing, brother? If you don't follow Steve T, Steve Twidell, on TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, and you're a wood turner, you really owe it to yourself to follow Steve. Brilliant wood turner, absolute genius when it comes to multi-axis turning. To all turning, but the madness comes in with this multi-axis. Follow Steve.
Okay. So I don't want to take too much off this edge, but I have to deal with this chip out from that resin. So we're going to go back to the bowl gouge, and we're going to
Sharpen it real quick. So for those of you just joining on the TikTok, if you want to hear my microphone and see multiple axes or multiple camera views, go to my YouTube channel. I had to re-request access to TikTok for Streamlabs, which is the app I use. Actually, the software program I use on my laptop for multi-camera view, and I haven't got that back from TikTok yet. So, fresh edge on the bowl gouge. And we're going to take a very, very light pass here.
balance this up again. And hopefully clean away that tear out. Or not tear out, that chip out from the resin. We're going to come up from this way. There. This resin is really, really dense. It's really hard. And for some reason, this blue resin is more dense than the gold resin that was in the lid. There were two separate pours. I don't know if if it was the same resin, but he mixed it a little different. I don't know. There's all kinds of factors when you're dealing with resin. But this blue is definitely harder.
Hang on a second. I got to message the house. Okay. So, again, I've got to get this chip. This chipping here has got to get cleaned up. This is this ridiculously hard resin.
So regardless of what I want that shape to be, I have to turn that chipping away. Otherwise, I'm going to be sitting here filling little tiny holes for days. And that's definitely, this is going to take a little bit longer than I thought it was. Anyway, we definitely don't want to sit here and fill holes for days. All right, let's take a look. That's much cleaner. Ugh, still got some chips right there. We got to turn those away. That's not something that will sand out readily. I mean, you can sand it out if you want to break out the 60 grit rock and beat it like a caveman. patient, take very small cuts, take your time, let the piece come down to the wood, to the tool, rather than trying to push the tool through the piece, and you can get a clean cut.
There we go. We got the chip out. We still have some bubbles. We'll deal with those. We'll probably use CA glue since we're lacking in the battery department for the UV flashlight. But honestly, UV resin is the best thing to do to deal with that. UV resin works amazing. But it's okay. CA glue works very well too, and there's nothing wrong with using it if you don't have UV resin. Now, this surface, we have to take away the tailstock so that we have free access. We need to make sure we have a nice flat surface here, and then we need to take a measurement of this diameter and transfer it here so that we can cut a recess that fits this tenon, and we get a nice firm friction fit. And then we'll, as we sand, it'll loosen up, so it's going to end up being a vacuum fit where you can pick the vessel up by the lid, but then you just give it a little pull and it'll go and open up. That's the goal, is a vacuum fit for this piece. Now you can see we've got, hey Scott, you can see we've got a lot more of this crazy little, all these little cutoffs that go all the way through. And part of the feature, one of the features of this, and I'm not sure if I can show you this or not. Let's switch cameras here. Let's figure out which camera's which, if I can show you this or not. Let's see. Yeah. So you're going to be able to see through that piece all these crazy little cutoffs from Schock's laser. That's cool. That's a really neat, that's a really cool idea from Nate there. And there, it's all very unusual because you don't know what it's fitting in. You don't know what he was making and where that came from. So I know what he cut out and what it looks like, but somebody picking the piece up will go, wow, that's really wild. Because it is. It's pretty crazy. It's pretty cool.
All right. So again, just taking our time here with the carbide.
And I will stress yet again, I'm using the carbide because this resin is stupid hard. Although it's cutting very well with the traditional tools, I have to sharpen like every 3 passes. And I've only got about 5.5 inches of bowl gouge left. So this will take 2 inches of that. And that's an expensive bowl gouge. So I'm gonna use the carbide.
I feel dirty and I'll have to take a Silkwood shower after, but as far as cost is concerned, I'll use the carbide. Okay. Doesn't have to be perfectly flat, but we need a nice even surface here.
That's squared up so that we can set our recess and get our lid fit. I'm going to turn the fan on real quick. Apologies for walking off camera, but it's starting to warm up. The other battery I need is my my thermometer is dead. I need to get a new battery for that so I can see just how hot it is out here. So apologies for the tornado sound, but that's preferable to a heat stroke. I'll get a bit more water in my system. Hydrating. water bottle from my friend Scott, North River. Okay, now we're going to take a vernier caliper. So I was perusing Shock's comments, and he was showing, he took some video of me turning a cane, and somebody got up in their feels about me using a vernier caliper to set diameters. And it's like, what? Wood turners can't use accurate measurements? What's the problem with that? Good grief. Get a real hobby. You know? Some people got to bitch about everything. All right, that's going to be... So I slow the lathe down, by the way, and I only touch this point to the piece. If I touch this point, it'll grab and fling this little sharp tool at me. So that's not real bright. So that's, I got a little bit too far in. So that little second mark, I corrected myself. So I'm going to accent that second mark there. There we go. And we're going to sneak up on that because we want a really good friction fit so that we can turn the top of the lid. Then we'll loosen that fit up a little bit so that it's more of a vacuum than a hard friction fit, so that a customer can get the lid off of their piece. So we're not going to make it a French fit, which is too loose, but we are going to make it a vacuum fit rather than a friction fit. So to do that, we need to change blades. So this, according to carbide enthusiasts, is a roughing blade with the square blade. I don't know whether it's necessarily a roughing blade. I just know that it does remove material fast, but you can still get a decent surface off of it. So I don't necessarily consider it a roughing blade. It just is a square blade that gives me a little bit different cut and allows me to do things like cut straight square shoulders for tenons, for recesses, I should say, for mortises. So we'll change that out real quick. And I will say, I don't know if any of the carbide tool, this is some random brand off of Amazon. I don't know if like Easy Wood, I don't know if they have a collet system for interchanging carbide blades, but they really should. Rather than sitting there with tiny little Allen keys, a collet system for carbide blades would be really nice for switching blades. So, you know, if somebody uses Bestwood and has an in with them, tell them I said that. And royalties can be sent to WataiWoodturning@gmail.com. So again, one of the things we have to be careful with carbide, and it's just as true with the square tip as it is with the round tip, is surface contact. You have this entire surface in contact and then this edge, and that's a lot of surface contact, which creates a lot of friction, which makes it tend to want to kick up. So you keep the tool rest as close as you can. That helps prevent that. Again, a longer handle. I'm not going to hollow with this. We're going to break out the Jacob's chuck and the Forstner bits, but it's something to consider, and a longer handle does help transfer the leverage from the work surface to you out here holding on to the end of that longer handle. A collet system would make a lot of sense
But it would mean that Easywood sold less handles, I guess, which is probably why they don't. However, me being practical and understanding that sometimes you have to do what you have to do, I can get this on the Zon for 30 or 40 or 50 bucks. And I'm sorry, but carbide is carbide. It's the handles that are different, but the little blades are not as far as I can tell anyway. So I would think that for their customers' sake, and because it's something nobody does, that they would put collets on these and just make them quick changeable, which would really, I mean, one of the a wood turner I know, a furniture maker who turns, the reason he likes carbide tools is speed. Is because it's so much faster than traditional tools. Well, not if you use the traditional tools right. That's another discussion. But it's so much faster, he says, and you can get to so much more done if you're using carbide. So from that standpoint, if that's why you want to use carbide is to improve your production time, then I would think that you'd be advocating, you'd be lobbying Easywood for collets. I would be. But I use carbide when it's necessary, which it is with this resin. But I certainly don't get much joy out of using carbide. I'm a very firm believer in the beauty of the process.
And when you use a tool that is, for lack of a better term, effortless, some of that beauty and that artistry is lost. Okay, let's see here. Yes, I can buy collets and make my own handles. You're absolutely correct. And if I had an easy access to the collets made by our British friend Martin Clarkson, I'd buy his. Because I really like his little interchanging system. And that's one of my biggest regrets is this is my Thompson 5/8" bowl gouge that I'm saving because I'd end up sharpening half of what's left on it to turn this. One of my biggest regrets is that I didn't find a collet and put it on here. So when this is a nub, I'm going to have to hit this with a torch, and I'm going to that's my first big tool handle. So I regret that I didn't find an interchangeable system to put in that. But when I made it, I didn't really understand the need for
Something like that. You learn. Okay.
Again, one thing that this is really good for is this little carbide blade is absolutely square. And this is machined square. So if I line this up with the bedway of my lathe and I come straight in and I keep an eye on that, make sure that that is absolutely straight as I cut, I'm going to get perfectly square sides here, which is going to make my lid fit. My lid has a very, very slight flare to the bottom, and it's a little bit narrower here at the top, okay? So that, again, ultimately I want this to have a vacuum fit, so a little bit of air can get in there so that when you pull, air can travel through and that lid's going to come off. But for now, what I need is this to be very good, tight friction fit. And I'm going to tell you this is too small, but we're going to sneak up on it. So I'm going to hold this to it and look at those lines, and I'm going to make sure that I stay short of that line. So I get this to the point where I have to kind of tap it in with my hand, because that's the fit I need so that I can turn the rest of the lid. I need that good, tight friction fit. So this takes time. You sneak up on it, and we may fit this 10 or 12 times. That's okay.
Rather do it right than have to do it again, because I don't have another one of these blanks. I do notice, though, that I probably need to take this a little bit deeper. This is a one-of-a-kind blank. And thank you very much to Nate at Shocks Art. Follow him if you don't. Especially go follow him on Facebook. His original Facebook account was hacked. So go follow him and let's build his following back up over there. Shocks art or Shocks functional art. But this is a one-of-a-kind blank. Very unique. And I'm very grateful that he said, hey, well, here, take it, turn it. Thank you very much, Nate. Appreciate that. Much love, brother. So again, just making sure we got some depth here. I want to make sure that lid clears. Okay, now, again, sight down, the bedway of your lathe, line it up with the shaft of the tool, push straight in. You will have perfectly parallel sides on your mortise or your recess or your whatever you want to call it. This is essentially a mortise and tenon joint. Okay, now I
No, it's too small, but I'm going to come look at it again. I'm going to compare it again. Okay. See, and again, Steve, Crown gives them only to their demonstrators because if they sold them, they'd make less money because they charge more for handles, for handled tools, which is great. Yeah, make a profit. But when you're talking about guys who are out here doing this on a budget, it makes sense to sell collets or sell a line of collet handles so that you can interchange your tool blades. And it makes sense. It's logical. Look, Hazeluk Tools sells collets. So I got this so that I can just interchange the blade of my 3/8-inch spindle gouge. My friend Mark Soleil gave me this collet that he had a friend custom make for him. Again, unscrew the little grub screw, change it out. This makes sense. This saves your average wood turner who's not a professional demonstrator a lot of money. Yeah, you're not wrong. You can definitely turn your own collets from aluminum on your wood lathe.
You are correct, sir. Heck, you can turn them from brass, should you so desire. All right. This one is going to be very close to our fit. Again, I'm really paying attention. I'm really focusing on the alignment of that tool.
Hey, Steve, welcome over to the tube of you. All right. And that is exactly what I wanted. This is almost fits. It almost fits, which means that I'm going to just very, very lightly remove a tiny bit and see if I can't get a good friction attachment there. So this is the part where if you sneeze, you're going to screw it up. So you got to be real careful here.
Okay.
Doing more of a scraping action than a cutting action. Ooh, so close. Very close.
Again, scraping rather than cutting. We're going to watch our tool alignment, and we're just going to scrape a hair. See if that'll get us
the jam we need. Ooh, Ooh, she's very close. Very, very close. And let me check something. Another good reason to use a vernier caliper when you're doing something like this is this little part right here on the end is a really, really good depth gauge. And I can see I'm just barely clear, which is where I want to be. So I know that when I put this together, when I jam this in, that's going to fit. So the bottom end of your vernier caliper is a great depth gauge. Again, why somebody would take umbrage with a wood turner using a vernier caliper doesn't make sense to me. I think you would... I guess they just don't understand wood turning.
I would think that if you want a craftsman to make you something, you'd want him to have the ability to be as accurate as possible. Why you would argue about using calipers is beyond me.
So nice light scrape. Boy, I feel like if we put a little bit of oil on there, it would slide right in, but it's not quite there. So again, just we're taking our time. This fit needs to be good. This has to be a good friction fit.
People say when they find a box like this, they find a turned box like this, well, why does it cost so much? Well, let me tell you. It takes a minute to make.
Takes a lot of precision, a lot of accuracy. Oh, we are right there. Now, if this was wood, what I could do is put it in a little bit, just cocked out a little bit, and I could create a friction burn that would let you see exactly how much you need to take. Yeah, exactly, Steve. Let you see exactly how much you need to take. You can do that. Resin doesn't do that, so I can't really scrape that to get that. I have to just shave the teeniest, tiniest amount.
Again, more of a scraping action than a cutting action here. Just remove the tiniest bit.
And we just do this until it fits. Oh, it's so close. It's so close. Listen, that's what we want. We're almost there.
Again, line up the shaft of the tool with the bedway of the lathe. That gives you perfectly parallel sides. You need that for the friction jam. Scraping rather than cutting.
Oh, come on. I feel like if it was 10 degrees warmer in my shop, this would slide right in there. I really do. We could get the torch out. We'll make her fit.
I can't take very much off. I got to be very, very careful. Okay.
So that is very, very close to perfect. It's too tight still by the absolute minimum amount. And if I jam it in, I'll never get it out. I have to give it a little tiny bit more room. I don't know. Yeah, I'm cutting very, very little because if I overshoot it, I can't put anything back. I can't put any layers back. So this you have to be super precise with this. Yeah, we're going to take a tiny bit more out. This is something that you have to take the time to do correctly because if you screw it up, you can't replace it.
Takes a lot of patience. That's why there are many woodworkers who won't turn. Because some of this precision stuff is just too, it takes a lot of patience.
Nope, I'm not going to force it. Can't force it.
I need it to be
Tight. I need it to go in there firm, but if I force it, I'll break it. Almost. We're very close. Thank you. I'm not going to try with your name. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I think that's going to do her.
There it is. Is it? Is it? Is it? Is it? Yeah, I think that we're going to call that still just a hair too tight. Yeah. Now, when you're banging on that, yeah, sanding will, but I still need to turn. I don't want to. I'm going to scrape it a tiny bit more. When you're banging on that, you can knock your tenon a little bit loose, so make sure you check your tenon. We're going to do one more scrape. That should get us where we need to go. And then we are going to bring tailstock back up while we do the predominant amount of work on that lid.
Now, some days you can do this in 3 or 4 passes and you've got it. Some days it takes 20, like today. You just need to be prepared to be patient and do the 20.
There she goes. Ooh. Well, it's a good thing I looked. We have a serious air bubble right here. Major air bubble. That could create a very big issue. So we're going to come in with a little bit of Starbond medium. That is a weak spot. We do not want to have go on us. So we're going to fill it. Let's see if we have any more major. That was just a really big bubble, almost a eighth of an inch. What's weird is it doesn't come all the way through. Well, you can. It sort of comes all the way through. You can see a little bit of it right here. Backfill it a little. That's a big bubble. Now I have to scrape it again. I'm going to have to scrape it again because there is a little bit of a raised surface on that bubble. But that was something that definitely I'm glad I saw. That could have ruined the whole thing. What causes air bubbles like this is when you pour all these different pieces of wood, you put all this wild little pieces of wood into a mold and you pour resin. If you do not have a pressure pot, it which shrinks down the air bubbles so that they're so tiny that they don't have an effect on the surface. If you don't do that, if you don't have a pressure pot, you get these air bubbles. You can degas the resin. However, you can't degas the wood. There's still air present in the cells of the wood. Okay? And that usually gets pushed out as the resin heats and cures. Come on. We can do it. We can do it. However, I'm going to call that just a tiny bit too tight. We're going to have to scrape it a little bit more. So when you put it in a pressure pot, if those bubbles come out of the wood, it it compresses them to the point where they're not visible. So if you don't have that pressure pot, you just can't. You have to find ways to deal with visible bubbles. See, I feel like that's just too tight. I really feel like that's just too tight. As I hate to do it, but I'm going to have to say we're going to come back out again. You should be able to, it should be tight enough that you can pull real hard and it'll pop out, but you shouldn't have to beat on it to get it out. That's too tight. And it's a very fine line. I mean, I'm dancing right on the edge of screwing this up. I won't. My mojo's working today, but it's a very fine line. There we go. Sweet. Now, oh, hollowing with the termite. Yes, Monchichi. How you doing, man? Good to see you. I happen to have a termite. Beautiful. Beautiful. Now I can see shape. Now I know this is fairly thin, so I know that I can't really take this side down very much. I can do a little bit, but really not much. But I can see some shape, and I can shape to the top of the lid here. So we're going to start working on that. We can bring up the tailstock again. We can see we're misaligned just a hair. We'll fix that. Anytime you take something out of your chuck and put it back in, you mess with the alignment. Okay, there we go. So, we focus on the lid and finish shaping the body. Going back again to the carbide.
For the sake of my gouge,
I hear you, man. Monchichi's been doing segmenting work with bowls. And that's and there's math involved, and yeah, boy, I feel that. I hate math too. I do. I don't do the maths very good in my noggin.
so we're going to work on this shape here. Just real lightly scraping with that flat edge or that carbide cutter. Just really work on making that the right shape, a good dome. And we're going to leave a little nubbity nub at the top. Technical wood turning term given to me by Steve T, the nubbity nub.
If you don't know what a nubbity nub is, hello Argentina. If you don't know what a nubbity nub is, well, you're just not one of the cool kids. Yeah, this stuff isn't terrible, Monchichi, but it ain't great. But it's so hard, it just chews the bull gouge to bits. I mean, I would end up sharpening 2 inches away from my gouge if I kept going with it. It's cutting very well on this stuff, but there's a cost. All right, so we have, again, a lot of bubbles here. Although there are bubbles in the blue part, it looks like the gold, I don't know if the wood was more porous, if it's something to do with the mix, but the gold part is definitely more activity in the bubble department.
So we're going to get this down closer to the right shape. And we're going to do some more CA glue filling. All right, this nubbity nub definitely needs to come down. It's too big. I'm going to get my little Shopmate square inch scraper here, which I have an angle on. That gives me a little better view of the shape here. I just have a longer cutting surface than I do on the carbide, so I've got more control of that shape. Let's see, show you guys on the overhead here. That just gives me a little bit more confidence in that shape right there, which I'm very happy with. I very much like that shape. And I think we're going to leave the center nubbity nub about there, but we're going to dome it a little bit. So we'll come back. We'll use the bowl gouge on the walnut here, on the tenon. Just going to get this little tenon off of here. And tool rest in there.
Yeah, I'll switch back to the other one for hollowing. I have to remember that I'm running multicam because I've got my phone here for the talk ticks, and I have to remember. Soon, I just reapplied for a stream key for TikTok so that I can use the laptop and the multicams again. Now that they're
cooperating with Streamlabs, which they should have done from the first, rather than trying to make their own streaming app. They should have just used existing technology like OSB or Streamlab. Just makes more sense. Cost them less money too. Okay.
So there is a temptation to just leave a little walnut finial there, but I'm not going to succumb to that temptation. I don't like it. We'll come in with
a 3/8 inch spindle gouge. We need to give this some shape. Good. Nubbity nub. Voila. Get this out of the way so I don't end up wearing it on my elbow. And we're going to go back to my scraper. I like that. I think I like that a lot. I think I want to undercut that a tiny bit more. Not much, just a little bit. Okay.
Oh, perfect. So you get this really cool little shape of one of the cutoffs, and I can't zoom that camera in anymore, but you get this little mustachio shape here, and it's dead smack in the middle of that lid. That is perfect. It's just perfectly aligned. That's fun. That's fun. But we got a lot of we got a lot of air holes. We got a lot of bubbles to fill. So what we're going to do is we determined that we don't have AA batteries in the house, so I cannot give a boost to my UV flashlight. I'm going to have to get some batteries, so we're going to have to go with the CA glue. We're going to take the whole chuck out rather than take the piece out of the chuck, because you never ever get it lined up perfect when you do. So we're going to take the whole chuck off so that we can stand this up, and gravity will help us fill these holes. What angle am I running on the scraper? Man, I can't. I'm thinking. Yeah, I think when I made it, I went 45 on these two faces, and then I think this is 15 degrees on my negative rake. I probably could have been much steeper. I probably could have come to 80 out here, but this works really well. And if I need to touch it up, all I have to do is take my diamond card and just a couple passes, and that lifts that burr right up. And this, I really like the way this scraper works. My goal was a negative rake, and to get down into the bottom of boxes in the corner, and I like how it turned out. It was originally 90-degree angle, cocked out. It's opened up a little bit, which I'm okay with, but more the point of that corner is to get down in the bottom corner of a box and get a nice, clean, sharp corner. So, wow. Okay. This has got so many bubbles in it, far more in the gold than in the blue. That is really porous. We're going to come back with the Starbond medium. Wow, that is drinking. That's a big bubble. Ooh. Thank goodness for cyanoacrylate. We can do the same thing we did with the Parfix as far as stabilizing this little skinny thin plywood. We can soak that with the medium or thin. Either one works. Thin obviously is going to soak in a little bit faster. But we just have some serious bubble action here. The gold has more air in it than the blue. I don't know why. I wasn't present when Nate mixed the resin. I couldn't tell you if he did something different or if it's a different resin. I have no clue. I just know that this has definitely got a lot more porosity. go ahead and just be generous and let that soak into that wood. Stabilize it before we finish scraping it and before we start sanding it. That'll also make sure that that surface above those air bubbles as I scrape it back down to level is going to be level and not going to dip out. A lot of bubbles. A lot of bubbles. Okay. Let that sit for a minute. Apparently Steve is leaving us. Have a good afternoon or evening, Steve. Appreciate you joining. Always a pleasure. So this is bumpy, but again, we're gonna scrape this surface, and this surface will end up getting sanded as soon as we finish shaping the body. So no biggie. And it is now 12:05. We've been at this for a full 2 hours. So I'm going to scrape this surface and level the surface out. And then I think I'm going to call it for the day. I knew this was going to be a long project, and I would like to continue this project live. So what I may do is pull the chuck off, set it aside, and we'll pick it back up next weekend. Simply because there's just a lot of people who are very interested in this blank and this project. And I don't mind setting that aside so that I can show you how it progresses. I have 2 chucks, so I don't have to take it out of the chuck. As much as I should have put it in my old chuck, but whatever. I like the new chuck better. So we're going to get that scraper back out. Let me get my face shield. So again, this is my shop-made scraper. I took a 1-inch bowl scraper and just squared off the end, and then I cocked that about 15 degrees so that I could get down into the bottom of a box without dragging this side of the tool all the way down the bottom of the box. So I keep a cutting edge all the way down in there. And then this was at 90 degrees, so this was sharper. But I've decided I kind of like a little bit of roundness to the bottom of my box. So if I come in with this corner and bring it around and then bring this into the corner, I get that nice round bottom of the box with that sharp corner in the bottom of the corner. So that's 45 degrees on the undercut, 15 degrees on the surface cut, and that's my negative rake scraper. And it works for me. This is purpose made, and it certainly fulfills the intended purpose. All right, now we're going to come back in with that little
3/8" spindle gouge and just touch up that shape in our little nubbity nub. Super fine cuts.
Ugh. One big bubble right here. I'm going to touch that with a little bit more CA. Teach a trick. So sometimes when you put CA in, it will still pick out a little. We're still got some work here too, but it'll pick out a little. Hit it with the accelerator first, then put the glue on, and then hit it with the accelerator again, and that helps it cure from the inside up. And it can resolve that little bit of an issue. Sometimes that happens. Ugh, the more I look at it, the more bubbles I find. Okay, so we got CA build up here. We're going to have to come back with the spindle gouge and get that. Hang on a second here. Make sure that's all cured. So we're going to come back in, very light cuts, clean that up. Make sure that's all good and crisp. Want clean lines, clean cuts. And we'll scrape the rest again.
But this needs to be sharp. There we go. We'll go back with the scraper. Make sure we have a sandable surface.
Better.
Not perfect, but workable. Again, one of the things that I'm dealing with is the
Difference in density between this thin birch plywood. I believe it's Baltic birch plywood, and there's some walnut cut off in here too, and the resin, which is incredibly dense. So that's a challenge. All right, we're going to do some shaping here, and then we're going to call it, but let me get a little bit more shape on the outside before we stop for the day. It has been a long morning, but it has been
pleasurable to be here with you and do some turning. If you don't know, I am a member of the Worldwide Woodturners Club. We meet every Wednesday night virtually via Zoom. It's a free woodturning club. We have demonstrations from woodturners literally all over the world, including our friend Steve Tweidel. I will be demonstrating this Wednesday night. And again, it's free. Not only am I a club member, but I also am the editor of our newsletter. Every 2 weeks, we publish a newsletter with photos of pieces turned by our club members. And it is really, really a pleasure and an honor to be able to present the world with the work of some of our club members. Not some, of all of our club members.
The only prerequisite to join is that you just have to join. It's free. Free woodturning club. So check it out, worldwidewoodturners.org. We do have a private Facebook group, Worldwide Woodturners, and we'd love to have you there if you are a woodturner or even a fan of woodturning. You're welcome. I learn something new every meeting, every Wednesday night. And that is an invaluable resource. So please do check it out. Now, my vision for this little piece here is that we have a little box, but it has a foot. So I'm going to do a little bit of work before I pause and start to kind of shape that down and give it a waist and define what the foot's going to look like. So let's do that real quick.
Just because I want to see where this is going. I really do need to wrap it up and go get some food, but I'm excited with where this is headed.
Starbond is texting me. They must know I'm using their stuff. Daryl, this is a combination of wood and resin. It is little cutoffs from Shocks Functional Arts laser in resin. Hey, Joe.
I needed to step away a little, you know. It's really frustrating. I work very hard at the lathe. I work very hard to develop the skills that I have. And I do my very best to provide the finest product off my lathe. And in this economy, it's just not very valuable. People's number one argument, I can get something just like that at World Market for $20. And so unfortunately, I can't support my family the way I need to with my turning because nobody's buying. I've vended 12 or 15 times last year, and I broke even. I made back what it cost me to go vend, and that's gravely disappointing. So I was forced to come out of retirement, which has been very difficult because I am disabled, but I don't have a choice. So I'm working a 6 to 4:30 so that I can make ends meet because my wood turning doesn't do it.
There's some other factors involved, but yeah. Sorry. Yeah, there are some other factors involved that are not really for public discussion. But yeah, as much as I'd love to be here turning every day, it doesn't pay the bills. So that is what it is. I'm out here. And so I'm out here when I can because I do love what I'm doing here very much. I absolutely have a passion for the lathe. And it breaks my heart that I had to come out of retirement, but it is what it is. All right, I need to stop for the day. I've been at this for 2.5 hours. My back is killing me. My feet are killing me, and I have a 10-hour work shift tomorrow. So what we're going to do is we're going to set this piece aside. We're going to pick this up next week, Saturday, most likely. We'll be back here around 10 o'clock Eastern Saturday morning. And I will have batteries in my UV light so we can use UV resin to patch these holes. It's a better solution than CA glue. CA glue works, but UV resin is a better solution. So I'll make sure that I have batteries in the flashlight so that we can use the UV resin. But I need to take a break. I need to go eat some food. My sugar's getting low. I can feel it. And again, I have a 10-hour shift tomorrow. So I want to thank you all for joining me. And for those of you who joined me on the Tube of You or Facebook, thank you very, very much for being there. I really appreciate it. And hopefully TikTok has got their stuff worked out, and I'll get my stream key and everything, and we'll be able to do multi-camera on TikTok as well as the other two platforms on Saturday. So we'll see you guys again Saturday. Thank you much.